when a child on holiday in the country with my grandfather, it was just one Sunday amongst others, but as happened quite often in rural Wales, my grandfather actually, who was responsible for the little chapel, would have to fill in the Sundays because there was no resident minister, and he got people from all over the place, nearly always Welsh speaking, but one Sunday a young Englishman came to town, and he was still a ministerial student, but full of zeal, and he preached on this gospel. And I remember the power of his word to this day. A word has life. A word has effect. Now remember what's going on here. This man, Levi, Matthew, is doing his job, a very unpopular job at that, and therefore he's not well liked. This visitor comes along, looks straight into his eyes, says two words, which in Hebrew actually would be one word, because it attaches the me to the verb, and he got up, left his job, and was immediately overjoyed. The proof being that he has this feast of which the Gospel here speaks, in which his own friends, who are official sinners, if you like, because they're handling this stuff on behalf of the invading enemy, the occupying force, and he changes his life to the extent that he goes eventually to Persia or Ethiopia, certainly Ethiopia, and is martyred, but not before having left an important document, the sayings of the Lord, which according to tradition he actually wrote in Hebrew. And the Gospel of Matthew, as it's come down to us, is very Semitic in tone. It's addressing fellow Hebrews, different in style from Luke, who wasn't one of the 12 and was writing in the language of a cultured physician, a doctor, giving details which the non-Jews needed, explanations in brackets. Now the word, therefore, that Matthew, by the end of his life, which of course was completely changed because of a word and one single word, that word is heard all over this planet, at least in Christian lands, and will be until the end of time, and can still have force, as did that sermon. And there are some sermons, even actually some transmitted sermons, e.g. on YouTube, that can have a force. I remember, in fact I was thinking about it just this weekend, coming across some of the archives I had on the YouTube poems and stuff. I remembered how it was in school days actually that another sermon had a huge effect. My parents had sent me when I was 17 to France, to Normandy for a month, and it was an invitation to full immersion, and not to cheat, but only to hear and speak French, because you were put in a French family and you were sent on daily lectures or classes. Full immersion, and actually it worked, because at 17 one does take in fairly easily. But it was also full immersion into, and in those days, still pretty Catholic France. We're talking about the years immediately after the council, and there was a lot of life around, and I felt it. They were applying renewal in a big way, and it was interesting to see what was going on. Already in 1971, there was no question of having a celebration between Saturday and Sunday, which would go on for less than an hour and wouldn't be fully sung. It already immediately applied the principle of increasing and not diminishing, and it was very creative and interesting. And so I was exposed to that, and it had its effect. And in that effect then was one happening which just took place one Saturday evening in a fairly modern church, that of St. Joan of Arc. You know that she was burnt to death there in Rouen, and still on her feast day every year they throw a bouquet of lilies into the River Seine where her cinders, her ashes had been thrown. Anyway, this was her church, and it was Saturday evening, and the priest started his sermon like this. Come with me down the N2, turn off at L'Aigle, and go to the end of that long road and you will come to La Trappe. We've just been on retreat to La Trappe. And the sermon essentially was a detailed description of what he'd seen and experienced. And at the age of 17, something like that actually can have its effect. And it did. To the extent that some time later I wrote to La Trappe and found myself there. But the word was heard. And the word actually can change all time if, as the Lord in one of his parables puts it, it is not throttled and finds root. I want to come into this question of what can throttle and also what can contaminate, obscure, and in many ways obfuscate the power of the word. It applies to each one here, and the younger one is, the more it applies. This day I was reading a very good analysis of the damage that's been done to anyone who right now is operating in the normal Western mode. Now I'll try and point out exactly the profound issue involved. Imagine the difference between a professional man now and one maybe 30 years earlier in time. Very few professional men right now have the power of will to be unavailable to their work once they're outside their workplace. The temptation to go into their email and therefore their professional email is just too great. Now what's going to happen? At home, a problem is going to come in from that screen. A big problem, a work problem. The wife is there. The only time that she has access to her husband, his thoughts aren't with her. The children are there. He's got a problem. He's just discovered it. He's not free. Add Saturday, add Sunday. Now, that's one. Add another big one. His smartphone has to be on because he needs access to all that it can give in the way of help. Therefore, it's available. Now, it's only a little signal that will come up, but it's itching. How many will have the strength of will to say, I won't look at it right now? The whole of Western society right now presumes that a text will be received and will solicit an immediate answer. The whole of modern society presumes immediate answer. What's going to happen? An immediate answer will come back. It's not finished. Now compare that with only 30 years ago, a letter gave you time to think about the right answer, and the job was finished for about a week until a reply might come back. Add to that, with the same machine which is giving you that, the mobile, the smartphone or whatever it might be, if it's on, it's also on for a call. Now, you know when a call is going to start. You don't know when it's going to finish. And you don't know also when you're calling somebody what that person is doing and who that person is with. So if you're getting an answer, it means that perhaps somebody you can't see is not at that point getting the attention that that person, having perhaps made an appointment or displaced himself, has a right to. It's downright rude. And how many of you have had the experience of being pushed aside while that's been sorted out? You don't count. And you're being polite, as though you're very interested, wondering when it's going to finish. It might happen a second time, and a third time. And it's very hard now to talk to a young person sometimes to get that person out of that little thing he's carrying in his hand. That's become the centre of his virtual existence. Okay, another one. Even bigger, actually. The instrument which is going to give you your email is also the instrument which is going to give you access to your Google research, which is good. But it's also the instrument which is going to give you access to your YouTube research, which can be good or not so good. But the YouTube research is very invasive. You know why? You go into one thing and what comes up? And it's recommended for you. So you look at it. And so is this one. So you look at it. And so is this one. So you look at it. You went in for one search. You're still there 2 hours later. And your wife, your children, your capacity to dialogue, where has it gone? There is quite a lot of research going on now about the quality of young people's capacity in dialogue, conversation, interrelationship. There's a mode of denial, but I think the evidence is there. You can see them if they're together. Often they're not talking to each other. Each one is in his virtual contact. And a person's friends, the word friend, is the number he's got on his Facebook, and so on. Virtual friends. Dangerous friends. Friends that can't be trusted. And your secrets are there for all to see, even 20 years later. That's capable of creating a situation of despair and suicide, all virtual. Because the real contact was not available, because it wasn't cultivated. Now, do you see what's happening to the quality of our life? We can't enjoy either our own company and that of our Maker, or that of our real physical friends. Even, I'm told, in marriage, even in the intimacy of their night, there are quite a few couples who still are looking at this machine in bed. That's more important. Devastation. I leave it with you, my friends. It all started from the Word, but we don't know the power of the Word. We can't feel it anymore. We've got too many words buzzing